So thank you so much, Rochelle Dean. Rochelle Dean is from the Bahamas. She's country contact for Women's Human Rights Campaign. Please update us about your work for Women's Human Rights Campaign in the Bahamas, including how you've been promoting the declaration using CEDAW as the basis of the argument to support sex-based rights.
So I am country contact for the Bahamas Chapter, and I've been specifically working to disseminate the information relative to the Women's Human Rights Campaign, bringing some clarity to the narrative as it relates to what's going on with our sisters all over the world. The Bahamas Chapter is currently focused on presenting the Women's Human Rights Campaign declaration to the country as we fully integrate into a Caribbean presence. So our strategic focus has been the declaration itself, and specific articles which are to reaffirm women's rights to freedom of opinion and expression, peaceful assembly and association, and political participation, reaffirming women's rights to fair play in sports, reaffirming the need to end violence against women and girls and to protect the rights of children, and of course, we oppose all forms of discrimination against women and girls that results from replacing sex with gender identity in law, policy, and social practice. As it relates to the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, the CEDAW Convention itself provides the basis for realizing equality between women and men through ensuring women's equal access to and equal opportunities in political and public life. This specifically speaks to our country, our nation, and what our laws stand for. This includes the right to vote and to stand for election, as well as education, health, and employment. States parties agree to take all appropriate measures, including legislation and temporary special measures, so that women can enjoy all their human rights and fundamental freedoms. The basis of our activism is the CEDAW Convention, which drives our ability to collect qualitative and quantitative evidence that drives proper policy development and analysis for women in the Caribbean that can finally be used in gathering empirical data for matters that impact women. So Article 5 of the CEDAW states that state parties shall take all appropriate measures to modify the social and cultural patterns of conduct of men and women with a view to achieving the elimination of prejudices and customary and all other practices which are based on the idea of the inferiority or the superiority of either of the sexes, or on stereotyped roles for men and women. So we know for a fact that one of the things that we're very, very focused on is making sure that both sexes are equal. And so in doing that, we are women setting the record straight for women. We want to disseminate accurate information that promotes the WHRC declaration that defines who we are as women, as defined in the CEDAW Convention. We also aim to defend the idea that we are now challenged by an ideology that has been conflated within the characteristics and rights that we wish to preserve and protect, and also takes away from what the initial purpose of CEDAW outlines and what that convention proposed to uphold for women in society, which is equality of the sexes and not the genders. And so that brings us to sex, gender, and equality and duality. So gender is the range of characteristics pertaining to and differentiating between femininity and masculinity. Depending on the context, this may include sex-based social structures, for example, gender roles and gender identity. And most scholars agree that gender is a central characteristic for social organization. So most cultures use a gender binary having two genders, boys or men, and girls and women. Equality represents only two values in order for equivalence or value equality to exist by two variables to those who believe in the concept. So without duality, there is no value. Women are biased, which is a fundamental human right that we received at birth. And we should not be made to feel indignant or discriminated against by an unnatural, unfair advantage. We have a right to say that this is unfair. And so it is a fundamental human right. There is no way that anybody can say that we are discriminating against anybody for, again, exercising our human rights to say that we disagree with the gender ideology. CEDAW committee recommendations for the Bahamas does actually include gender ideology and the elimination of discrimination for transgender women to advance gender equality. However, the Bahamas government opposes these recommendations as proposed by the CEDAW committee and the United Nations Human Rights Council, stating that the country identifies with conservative Christian values that are the basis of social norms within the society at large and the country. So what's happening is we have recommendations by the CEDAW committee, but again, there's also the social opposition, and that is 100% supported by the government. And so if we know anything about dualism, dualism donates the state of two parts. The term dualism was originally coined to denote co-eternal binary opposition, a meaning that is preserved in metaphysical and philosophical duality discourse, but has been more generalized in other usages to indicate a system which contains two essential parts. The moral dualism is the belief of the great complement or conflict between the benevolent and the malevolent. It simply implies that there are always two moral opposites at work, independent of any interpretation of what might be moral and independent of how these may be represented. Dualism drives equality, and equality means everyone should receive the same treatment, which is the basis of human rights. As it stands, gender equality and anything that supports that ideology does not promote equality. Actually, it proves to abolish equality and dualism. So we are working avidly in this chapter to have discussions with specific organizations like the Rotary Club of Nassau on women's rights in the Bahamas, as well as we continue to advocate with the CEDAW committee expert in the Bahamas, Marian Sayers, and to present our concerns that impact policy for women in the Bahamas, specifically gender ideology, and also to have our voices heard so that people can know that WHRC does not support that ideology and that it actually does infringe on the rights of women, and it actually does impact specific charters or sections and articles of CEDAW that speak to equality of the sexes, which are two, and not and in opposition, that does gender ideology does impact women and men in that instant. And that's something that we are working very hard to make sure that we want to allow the CEDAW committee to know that we're very concerned about that this does impact the CEDAW Convention within itself. It impacts the basis of human rights. And so it is just something that we have to continue to advocate for. And so we continue to have those discussions, and we continue to disseminate that information so people can know that duality is actually equality. And if we are going to speak about equality, there has to be a level of inferiority, because that's what we are advocating for, equality. And so what that means is that CEDAW set out in its convention that one of the sexes has always been inferior, which was women. And so the challenge with CEDAW was that we are fighting for the equality of women and men. And so gender ideology is just a distraction and something that actually has no basis. The basis of it actually is to abolish physics and metaphysics, which is yin and yang. And it really produces nothingness. And so that's really our focus right now, making sure that people have that understanding so that there is no confusion as to what we present, what we are talking about, and the fact that in order for the basis of CEDAW to continue to have its standing and to continue to advocate and produce the outcomes that we want for women, we have to set the record straight, particularly for some of the things that gender ideology actually does to the CEDAW Convention. And it does diminish, if not many of the articles, it actually seeks to abolish it. And so you can contact Bahamas womensdeclaration.org to discuss if you would like to assist the Bahamas chapter or discuss further things that we can actually present to our CEDAW committee expert as we continue to advocate. please do reach out to me. The absurdity of gender ideology cannot be justified with CEDAW. And I think we need to remember that when we are advocating for ourselves as women. There is no basis to gender ideology. It all boils down to it being nothingness. And so therefore, you know, and I think I've reiterated this, and I've said this from the beginning, Joe, that there is no basis for it. And so, and I've thought about it, and you know, I still can't find any means of why this is being included into anything.